Imagine a man who declared that truth was a lie, morality a cage, and that God himself was dead. Now imagine what such a man had to say about women. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't whisper his opinions. He carved them into stone. With fire in his language and a hammer in his hand, he smashed the sacred illusions of his time, and women were not spared. His words about them were sharp, cryptic, and often brutal. But were they hatred or prophecy? In one of his most quoted lines, he warns, "Are you going to women? Do not forget the whip." It's a sentence that has sparked outrage, confusion, and endless debate. Was it a joke? A metaphor? Or did Nietzsche genuinely believe women were something to dominate, to distrust, to fear? Nietzsche didn't write like a scientist or a priest. He wrote like a storm. His thoughts on women were tangled in metaphor, myth, and irony, but the violence of his language was real. He described women as seductive, cunning, instinctual, creatures of emotion rather than reason, chaos rather than order. But to reduce him to a misogynist is to misunderstand the man entirely. Nietzsche wasn't trying to comfort. He was trying to provoke. This is not a defense. It's an excavation. We're not here to sanitize Nietzsche's views. We're here to drag them into the light and stare at them without blinking. Because whether you agree or recoil, one thing is certain. Nietzsche didn't just challenge how we see women. He challenged how we see truth, love, power, and the masks we wear. And behind every brutal sentence, there's a deeper question clawing its way out. Was Nietzsche attacking women? Or was he revealing something we've been too afraid to admit? Let's find out. Nietzsche wasn't a man of moderation. He didn't offer balance, and he didn't seek consensus. He was war in the form of thought, explosive, dangerous, alive. To read him is to stand in a burning building while everyone else still pretends it's a home. He didn't write to soothe. He wrote to shake, to tear, to ignite. And in that fire, nothing was sacred. Not God, not morality, not truth. Certainly not women. He believed that modern philosophy had been castrated, softened by religion, morality, and the herd instinct. Truth, for Nietzsche, was not something you discovered. It was something you created with blood, pain, and will. To live was not to conform. It was to conquer. And for those who lacked the stomach for that conquest, there was always comfort. Christianity, equality, romance, all of them illusions dressed up in virtue. In that brutal hierarchy of strength, Nietzsche placed instinct above reason, passion above peace, and power above pity. He admired those who rose, not those who begged to be lifted. He dreamed of the Übermensch, the one who transcends weakness and manufactures meaning out of the void. And anything that reminded him of dependency, sentimentality, or submission, he struck down without hesitation. That's the world from which his words about women emerged, not as isolated opinions, but as fragments of a larger war. Nietzsche wasn't attacking individuals. He was attacking ideas, forces, roles. And in women, he saw something primal, something unfiltered, something dangerously close to the truths men worked so hard to ignore. So when he wrote of women, he didn't speak with tenderness. He spoke with a hammer. Because to Nietzsche, the problem was never whether something was beautiful or beloved. The question was always the same. Is it strong or is it lying? Nietzsche rarely spoke plainly. He didn't build arguments. He detonated them. His writing came in aphorisms, fragments, lightning bolts of language that left more questions than answers. And when it came to women, his words were especially volatile. "You are going to women? Do not forget the whip." It's the most infamous line he ever wrote about them. But what did he mean? It wasn't a command, nor a confession. It was a provocation, a flash of cruelty wrapped in a riddle. Some have read it as satire. Others see it as an exposure of hidden social dynamics, an attack not on women, but on the illusions that bind men to them. Still others take it at face value, a warning, a threat, a glimpse into a mind poisoned by resentment. Nietzsche never explained it. He didn't clarify, apologize, or expand. He left it there, like a shard of glass in a pool of water. Beautiful, sharp, and impossible to ignore. And this wasn't an isolated moment. Across his works, he described women as manipulative, instinctual, superficial. But he also called them wiser than men, more loyal to life, more attuned to reality. Contradictions weren't mistakes for Nietzsche. They were method. He didn't trust clear answers. He trusted the chaos beneath them. So when he spoke of women, he often did so through masks. Sometimes he was mocking the romantic ideals of his time. Sometimes he was attacking the weakness he saw in himself. And sometimes, maybe, he was just swinging at whatever illusion dared to stand too close. The danger with Nietzsche isn't that he was wrong. It's that he made you wonder if he was right. His view of women wasn't a philosophy. It was a challenge. And once you read it, you couldn't unread it. Not without flinching. Not without thinking. To Nietzsche, women were not abstract ideas or political categories. They were forces, raw, instinctual, and dangerously close to the primal core of life itself. He didn't view them through the lens of equality or sentimentality. He viewed them through his war with civilization. And in that war, women played a role more ancient, more cunning, and more intimate than most men dared to see. He believed women were closer to nature, not in a poetic romantic sense, but in a ruthless, evolutionary one. While men cloaked themselves in ideals, in reason, in artificial codes of honor, women, he claimed, remained tethered to what was real, to seduction, to survival, to the rhythms of power that had existed long before morality was invented to tame them. He wrote that, "Woman is not yet capable of friendship. She knows only love." But even that love, in Nietzsche's eyes, was not innocent. It was strategic, a dance of masks designed to influence, to attract, to reshape the will of men. Women to him were not interested in truth. They were interested in effect. They didn't argue. They didn't reason. They didn't create abstract systems of thought. They moved through instinct, with elegance and precision, shaping outcomes not by confrontation, but by atmosphere. In that way, Nietzsche both admired and feared them. Because while men deluded themselves with ideals, women, he believed, were never fooled by such things. They embodied the real will to power without needing to name it. They lived it, wielded it, became it. That's what disturbed him most. Not that women were weak, but that they were powerful in ways men refused to admit. Not through domination, but through influence. Not with the sword, but with the smile that makes a man forget he ever held one. Nietzsche didn't see love as salvation. He saw it as a transaction, masked in poetry, driven by biology, weaponized by instinct. He believed the language of romance was built to hide what love actually was, a battlefield for control. And in that battlefield, women were not victims. They were tacticians, masters of seduction, carriers of the hidden will to power. He didn't accuse them of malice. In fact, that's what made them so dangerous. Their influence wasn't deliberate. It was natural. A woman didn't have to overpower a man physically. She only had to be desired. And the moment she was desired, she held leverage. The lover becomes the servant. The poet becomes the pawn. He tells himself he's choosing, but Nietzsche believed he's already been chosen, shaped, redirected. He saw this as a form of domination more subtle than any empire. Love was not the end of the struggle. It was the beginning. Beneath the flowers and sonnets lay strategy, timing, absence, approval withheld just long enough to deepen dependency. Nietzsche called it cruelty, but not in the sense of violence. It was the cruelty of being needed, the cruelty of awakening longing that could never be satisfied without surrender. For him, the tragedy wasn't that men were enslaved by love, it's that they volunteered. They begged for the chains. They called them destiny, and they worshipped the very force that dissolved their independence. Nietzsche didn't envy this power. He exposed it. He believed men needed to wake up, to see seduction not as a compliment, but as a contest. Because in his view, the lover who loses himself in devotion is not rising. He is falling. And what he calls passion might just be a slow, graceful descent into obedience. When the world began speaking of women's liberation, Nietzsche did not applaud. He sneered. He believed the movement wasn't a revolution. It was a regression. To him, women who sought to imitate men were not advancing. They were abandoning their essence. He saw feminism not as a cry for justice, but as a symptom of cultural decay. Another form of leveling. Another attack on difference in the name of equality. He didn't want women to become like men. In fact, he found the very idea grotesque. He believed men and women were fundamentally, biologically, and spiritually distinct, not just in body, but in purpose. And any attempt to erase that distinction was, in his eyes, a betrayal of life itself. The feminist ideal of equality struck him as a lie, one that flattened excellence, erased strength, and celebrated mediocrity. Nietzsche wasn't nostalgic. He didn't long for tradition, but he loathed imitation. And when women reached for power in the same ways men did, through competition, through ideology, through institutions, he saw it as mimicry, not evolution. He believed women had their own power, raw and instinctual, bound not to reason, but to life. And when they discarded that to play by male rules, they didn't rise. They became hollow. His critique wasn't just of feminism. It was of modernity itself. A world obsessed with fairness, with sameness, with comfort. A world that confused compassion with virtue and conformity with strength. In that world, the feminist cry for equality was just another noise in a chorus of weakness. Nietzsche didn't see emancipation as freedom. He saw it as forgetting. Forgetting what women were, what they embodied, and what they alone could bring into being. And in chasing the image of man, he believed they were abandoning the force that once made them terrifying, irresistible, and real. Nietzsche didn't believe in salvation, but he did believe in transformation. And at the center of that transformation was a figure he called the Übermensch, the one who rises beyond morality, beyond herd instinct, beyond the illusions of comfort and conformity. But even in that ascent, one force remained, mysterious, magnetic, inescapable. Woman. He often spoke of the eternal feminine not with tenderness, but with awe, not as an equal, not as an ideal, but as a force. To Nietzsche, woman wasn't a person to be understood. She was a presence to be navigated. She stood for everything the Übermensch must confront: desire, chaos, beauty, danger. Not as an obstacle, but as a mirror. She did not block the path. She revealed it. In her, he saw both temptation and inspiration. The woman who seduces is also the woman who awakens. Her instincts are sharper, her loyalty to life deeper. While man tries to rationalize existence, woman embodies it. She does not need philosophy to validate her presence. She is presence. And that, Nietzsche believed, was why she was both feared and desired. The Übermensch must not be destroyed by her, nor must he worship her. He must stand in her presence and remain unshaken. That is the test, not to resist her entirely, but to master the part of himself that longs to kneel. To take the eternal feminine and transmute it, not into submission, but into creation. Woman, in Nietzsche's mythic world, was the storm and the silence after it. She was not truth, but she could force truth out of a man who dared to face her without illusion. And in that confrontation, something new could emerge. Not weakness, not domination, but the fire of someone who has danced with chaos and remained unburned. It's easy to call Nietzsche a misogynist. The words are there, etched in ink, sharp and unapologetic. But to stop there is to flinch too soon. Because Nietzsche wasn't trying to flatter women or men. He wasn't writing to make the world fairer. He was writing to strip it down, to expose the primal mechanics hiding beneath the polite surface. And in that exposure, he used women not just as subjects, but as symbols, as mirrors. When Nietzsche spoke of women, he was also speaking of illusion, instinct, seduction, and control. He was pointing at the undercurrent of life, where power hides behind affection, where weakness dresses itself in virtue, and where desire corrupts even the noblest soul. Woman, in this sense, was never just a gender. She was a myth, a metaphor, a manifestation of the chaos men pretend they've conquered. The outrage his words provoke says as much about us as it does about him. We want our philosophers to be kind. We want our thinkers to love what we love. But Nietzsche refused to play along. He turned the blade inward and then outward, cutting through sentiment, exposing the lies we tell ourselves to feel safe. About love, about strength, about gender. He didn't hate women. He didn't love them either. He saw them through the lens of someone who had stripped the world of comfort and found only hunger and instinct waiting beneath. And when he held that vision up to us, we saw something we weren't ready to face. Maybe Nietzsche's cruelty wasn't aimed at women at all. Maybe it was aimed at the fragile ideas that surround them, the ones we clutch when the truth is too hard, too ugly, too real. And maybe that's why his words still cut, because the mirror hasn't cracked. We've just stopped looking.